What's up, guys? So it's getting to the time of the year where the Archon of the year will be coming out soon. We're currently in 6.1 and usually the Archon comes out within the first 2 to 3 patches. And as always, I'm having discussions on what we think the Archon could do. So the debate's been going on online, so I just want to give my input in this video. It might not necessarily be what they'll actually do, but it will just be my idea of what I think would be good for the game. Just because I know there's going to be some of you guys in the comments saying, oh, can't wait until this ages like milk, which is fine. You know, if the developers want to power creep the game and add HP inflation, then yeah. So don't say this will age like milk. This is just a discussion. So we can say this: the last 3 Archons came out and people love playing them with the DPSs that released that year. Even if you want to add older ones like Zhongli, is this the trend that people want to see the Archons team with the other characters released alongside them? Now, I do think it's possible to make Columbina a support upgrade for Nod-Krai teams like Nefer and Flins, but the point of this video is I think if they do that, it will be a big mistake. And that's why I think this video can be an interesting discussion. You might not agree, but hear me out on the discussion. So let's say you have your Nefer team or your Flins team. Funnily enough, they have very similar teams if you play Sucrose, Nefer Lauma or Flins Nefer. Let's say you've been enjoying these teams and they feel strong. There's a new support and they increase your team's damage by 10%. I know people have already been making calcs that like Nefer teams and Flins teams, they're about as strong as some of the other meta teams, but they're not really stronger. I know that exists, but it does ignore the utility that Nod-Krai DPSs have in terms of countering enemies and whatever. Anyway, put that aside for now. What if there's a new support that comes out and they increase your team's damage by 10%? So that sounds cool. That sounds like a buff to your Nefer or to your Flins team. Well, my point to my video is, yes, that does sound like a buff, but actually no, because instead what that could mean is maybe your Nefer does do 10% more damage with a new character, but what if that just means they're increasing the content's HP by 10%? So you didn't actually move the needle at all. Power creep doesn't actually make you feel stronger. If anything, it could make you feel weaker until you manage to get the upgrade. Now I can show you this by looking at Stygian Onslaught. Obviously Stygian Onslaught isn't the whole game, but you'll see what I mean. The first electrocharge sort of fight that we got in a long while was this cactus boss in the second Stygian Onslaught, and I cleared it with this random team. But as you guys probably know, this was very doable as long as you had a base Nefer. You probably watched videos from creators at the time, people even doing budget taser teams like this team here, and just Nefer by herself with basic investment was enough to get the clear. Whether your standards are dire or whether your standards are fearless, she was very strong at baseline for your level investment. But one patch later, they released another electrocharge sort of content here, this shock trooper. And if you guys remember, if you took your same investment of Nefer to this boss, all of a sudden you were struggling. It was actually, you could break the shield, but the DPS check was pretty brutal. And this Stygian actually released a few days before Flins actually came out. And then what people realized was it actually kind of trivialized as soon as you got Flins. You can see here, I didn't have either, so I had to play this scuff team again. But you could do it with Flins, Nefer, and even 4-star weapons. Yeah, as you can see here, many people were doing it. A similar story happened with the new Bloom teams. Now, Llama's release was slightly different because, as you guys remember, there was this cheese strat. I even made a video on it showing my clear, and just Llama by herself, she was so broken versus this boss. She was so broken, you could basically just do this one-shot strategy. But even if you didn't do that, let's say you ignored the cheese, you would still get it clear very fast with just Llama and whatever sort of random Bloom team you could conjure up. But the next patch, when they released Nefer, they released, you could say any one of these bosses was the Nefer boss. There wasn't a strict Bloom one, like this is Ascendant Gleam, this is Lunar Reaction Damage, this boss just sucks. But yeah, one of these two you could say is the Nefer boss. But regardless, it's basically the same story. Even if you had Nefer and her weapon, whichever one, it was still pretty challenging. And Llama by herself definitely isn't cutting it. So as you can imagine what I'm saying, The Archon as a new support for your Nod-Krai team, maybe like 2 or 3 Stygian Onslaughts from now. Or like I said, it's not just about Stygian Onslaught, maybe it's an Abyss, maybe it's Theater, whatever, a couple patches from now. Your teams may not necessarily actually feel stronger. They might just feel about as strong as they do now. It's just on harder enemies. Now, just for comparison, in an alternate timeline, as you can see, a lot of people, including myself, have pretty much used the same-ish Skirk and Mavuika teams for quite a while. Similar teammates, Skirk, basically the same sort of core going on. And the way I see that, that's because these other teams haven't really had upgrades. So these teams were strong enough, and after that, they're kind of chilling. They haven't made content that pushes us to pull something new for these old teams. And yeah, of course, obviously, this is just talking about meta. I'm sure there are people who want Columbina to be a support because they want to put her in their new team that they like for enjoyment purposes. And I get that. But to be fair, still, there is the argument where most people probably don't want their favorites to be a support, because you'd rather play them on field and get some nice screen time with them. Now, there is a disclaimer, because I do think Nefer teams have the obvious teammate gap, lacking synergy. You probably know a lot of Nefer teams, people are playing sustainless, or even if they are playing a sustain, maybe you're playing someone like Shinobu or Kokomi. Maybe you're playing someone like Shinobu or Kokomi, or honestly even like a prototype Amber Nahida, to where they're obviously not doing that much to be a perfect teammate. The Nefer teams definitely do want something, and not just that, the developers definitely know they've been designing Nefer to work in specific teams, and they will know there is a gap. So they most likely, like 90% chance, have a plan for her. There is no way the developers intend you to be playing Nefer with either scuffed teams or sustainless. And for that, I say I do hope either Columbina or Yehoda fill that slot for Nefer. Yehoda ideally for lore reasons, teaming up with Nefer, but Columbina could do that either. But even if we do get a new Nefer teammate, I don't want them to be a damage upgrade. We could get a support somewhere, one of these two characters. An upgrade has the same EM buffs that they have, but you do get the comfort of a shield or a healer without actually moving the needle on the DPS. And then for Flins teams, they wouldn't really be an improvement either, because you already have Nefer as your shielder. And if they do that, then that way they aren't really getting that incentive to inflate the enemy's HP, and you could still feel just as strong with your old teams. It'll just be more scuffed because you don't have the best quality of life. So that's actually my hope, for Columbina to be similar release to Mavuika. Now obviously, the way I'm saying that, I mean that in terms of her primarily being her own DPS that can be played as a support. That would be my ideal design for Columbina. Obviously, Mavuika does have her issues where as a DPS, she was and is too strong for sure. But as a support, I think Mavuika is a good idea. It's pretty balanced. You know, compare someone Mulani to like Chlorand. Like what we've learned is Mavuika is only really a damage upgrade in old teams where you're doing proper damage on her in the dual DPS way, like with Chlorand. Then you're getting the big damage. But whenever you're using Mavuika as just her off-field kind of thing, for just off-field pyro and scroll set, she's more of like a quality of life thing. Mavuika isn't really doing enough damage to be a big increase, or if it is, it's very small. Purely using her as like an EQ, but it's not insane. She gets strong when you're utilizing her damage more. Another reason is one of the big benefits for investing in Nod-Krai DPSs now, whether you're playing your Nefer Llama or Flins Nefer, is even though it does suck that both of them basically do need their signature teammate, and that teammate released basically just the banner before them, at least the other two teammates are very budget. And Flins does have Nefer's shield, which is great, but at least Nefer has more variety, and a lot of them are 4-star teammates. Like you could use Xingqiu, you could have Shinobu, you could have Kokomi, you could have Nahida. There's loads of flexibility. You only really have to worry about the two characters here. Diona as well. And yeah, why would we as a community want them to further restrict these teams? Now you're probably thinking money. So just as a counterpoint, I'm gonna bring up my Star Rail account for a second. And a perfect example for this is we can look at the Firefly teams. Originally these teams were very budget friendly. All you really needed was Firefly and Run May, and then the main character and Gallagher were free, and this was chilling. The issue is they kind of got greedy and they gave us an upgrade for the Traveler in terms of Fugue, who I didn't have, and then they gave a Gallagher upgrade in terms of Linkshot, which I did pull, but she wasn't actually that good. But they did turn the Firefly team from very achievable to very premium, and they did increase the investment that you needed, because if I pull up the Anomaly Arbitration, the last patch actually had a break shield, which was this first boss here. But even though I basically had the premium Firefly team except without Fugue, even in the break shield where they gave so much buffs to break, I couldn't even get this clear with my break team. I had to use my Herta Sustainless team. So I wasn't able to keep up with that inflation that they brought because they wanted you to play the premium team. That's my point. Now lastly, there probably is a lot of discussion you could give to counter this video. Number one being like, what about old teams? Similarly to how Mavuika worked well in a lot of old teams, if Columbina was some sort of off-field Hydro, that was really nice. There is a world where an off-field Hydra could work well with everyone, ranging from Milani to Navia to Skirkin Freeze teams. That would be cool. Vape teams. An off-field Hydro is one of the most flexible ideas that you can get in the game. So yeah, for sure, 100% that could be good, because in a way, buffing old teams is reverse power creep. But in my opinion, I think it'd be better to make an old team buffer be a support who doesn't work well with Nefer and Flins and the new teams. The other point you can make would be future teams, that it's not just Nefer and Flins, that what if we get more Nod-Krai DPSs? Because we just barely started in Nod-Krai. Now that's a good point. It would be nice for, I don't know, a future Nod-Krai, I don't know, Sandrone maybe in this slot here. Let's just put Noah as the maid. It would be nice if Sandrone, instead of her having her own Nefer or Llama, then you could just get Columbina here. And that would then give more incentive for them to make her as a support. Not to mention, like a Sandrone and Columbina would be nice for lore reasons as well. And yeah, that pairing would be cool, absolutely. But could they make Columbina that universal without also buffing the older Nod-Krai DPSs? I don't know. I don't really know the answer there. I don't think they could. But anyway, that's just my perspective in the debate. You could easily disagree with me, but I do think this is opening up a nice little debate here. At the end of the day, the developers are going to do what they're going to do, but I think it is nice discussing potential kits. You can let me know your POV in the comments, and yes, thank you for coming to my TED Talk on how we avoid power creep. Thanks for watching, guys.